So I think we can move on to our final panel. This is end user applications. So Matt Liston will be our moderator, and our panelists will be Isabel from POAP, Deborah from Althea, Anna from Cow, and Dekan from DAOHaus.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about end user applications and if people care about decentralization, if so, why or why not. So could everyone introduce themselves?
Sure, thanks, Matt. I'm Deborah Simpier. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Althea, which is a machine-to-machine microtransactional platform and dynamic routing protocol. And over the last 5 years, we've built to thousands of homes with broadband internet access and have definitely a lot of experience working with decentralized applications in the real world and some learnings that we hope to share with you.
Hi, I'm Dekan from DAOHaus, a co-founder of DAOHaus. We built and maintain smart contracts and front-end libraries to help build DAOs easier, custom DAO tools and things like that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isabel Gonzalez. I'm the general manager of POAP Inc. POAP Inc. is the company that custodies the proof of attendance protocol. We mint digital collectibles for the preservation of your life's most precious memories. In the last 3 years since the protocol has been live, we've minted over 6 million memories for over 1 million collectors, and we're looking forward to minting many more.
Hello, I guess I'm last. I am Anna, co-founder of CowSwap, and CowSwap is a DEX aggregator that is protecting users against front running. And we've been live almost 2 years at this point and have transferred $20 billion.
Cool. So first, I want to hear from everyone independently. If you were talking to the far end of a non-crypto person, but an internet user, how would you describe what a decentralized application is and why they should care about it and potentially use it in no more than 2 sentences?
I think the core of decentralization is ownership. Ownership means choice and leverage. Could I have one more sentence?
Go for it. They were short sentences, so
Okay.
You got one.
So ownership gives us the choice to be able to decide what we want to do and have freedom. And leverage allows us to be able to earn revenue or to use a product in the way that we want to. So I think those core values are appreciable for everyone.
A decentralized application is an application that can't be turned off, not even by the developers. No one has that power.
I'd say a decentralized application is one that has no single point of decision-making and no single point of failure. And a good reason to care about it is, in essence, just not being deplatformed, right? The ability to, avoid being censored by the algorithms of Facebook, Instagram. This is something we've seen a lot in recent years. Decentralized applications, I guess, don't do that.
Since I'm working on a DEX, I would probably use FTX as example and tell people that it's good to have access over their own funds.
Okay, so I like that was like a different take from each of you. Why do you think your explanation of why someone should care about decentralized applications is enough for, say, 95% of internet users to want to actually use them?
Well, I would say that I'm not necessarily sure that it is without the convenience factor over the top. So blockchain should be under the hood, just the way that anyone who uses Chrome doesn't need to know about TCP/IP or enjoy the core freedoms of the internet and think about that ethos on a daily basis. There has to be the convenience layer over the top. So I think when you build in the UX that is familiar and is easy for people to use with the core freedoms underneath, then it's a value proposition that 99% of people can get behind.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't know if it'll ever be 99% of people that will really care about decentralization. Maybe they won't know about it, or maybe they'll want it because of the time when they need it. So it may be that you're living in a country where it's important, or you're afraid of something that could happen in the future. So yeah, maybe eventually people get as paranoid as me. But
I think fundamentally, people actually don't care very much about whether the system that they're using is decentralized or not. People want to interact with environments that are trustworthy and secure and enjoyable, right? And if your decentralized system can't provide them that, it doesn't matter how decentralized it is. No one cares about how it runs underneath. That being said, I think much like self-custody, decentralization is one of those things that you don't care about until you really all of a sudden have a reason to care, which is that the business you spent a long time building suddenly no longer has access to its lifelines, or the program that you've been building suddenly is unable to continue functioning as it was previously. Right, so decentralization, I think, for 95% of internet users does not matter at all. But if you're trying to build something that has a lasting foundation, at some point you're going to want to know that no one has the key to turn your thing off.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points have been mentioned already. From my perspective, I think, yeah, the question is interesting. I don't think that 99% of people will care in the future about decentralization. Maybe you can compare to some extent to privacy. Not everyone cares about privacy either. But I think for decentralization to be adopted, I think you just need a critical mass who is using the technology and advancing the technology. And then adoption, like the more and more users are adopting it, the more other people will just follow.
Could I add?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things that I think speeds decentralization adoption is that it does allow us to leverage and do things we didn't before. Permissionless interfaces allow us to own and participate in economies and markets that we didn't used to be able to. So I just wanted to add the point that decentralization actually empowers new markets that weren't there before and accelerates markets that are stagnant.
What assumptions have you made in the past about user preferences that you think were incorrect now?
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me because I definitely have had early in our career we used a Coinbase app to onboard users to the decentralized internet platform, and I remember talking through someone 10 a.m. in the morning, drunk and on lithium, trying to talk them through the Coinbase app. So it was at that point where we started looking at like how do we simplify this for kind of like a McDonald's button, right, for frying chicken nuggets, chicken nugget button, and took a much more Apple approach to guiding people through that. But one of the interesting things is that I found that a subset of people, and people you wouldn't necessarily expect, people in rural areas, a farmer, or maybe someone who's low income that wants to get into investing in crypto, were much more curious and wanted to take it, kind of the next way. So, or the next step deeper. So interestingly, what sort of evolved is kind of two pathways. A very simple pathway for people to onboard onto the application in a way that's very Web 2 veneer. And then the second pathway that allowed them to actually interact with their wallets underneath that.
yeah, I think that we saw something similar. At one point we were making a mobile app so that you could get into access your DAO. Or join a DAO and onboard into it. And what we thought was like, okay, let's do something interesting and do like an ephemeral key that just abstracts away any of the wallet connections and things like that, and made it more like one click. But it turned out that people actually didn't like that, and it actually made things like getting logic around like who owns the key, how to restore it, how to if your local storage gets messed up, what happened to it. And so it actually made it a little more confusing, and it got rid of kind of the secret sauce that people like with Web3. So it's kind of like, it seems like we go through this every cycle, that there's a movement to like abstract away anything Web3 and anything wallets, anything public-private key encryption, and just make everything feel like Web2. But then what we just end up with is kind of really crappy Web2 apps and not cool Web3 apps. So it's good to like think about the people that are using it and that they have accounts and they want to be a part of that usually. So education instead of abstraction.
So I think POAP might be in a little bit of a unique position compared to the rest of the folks on the panel, because as some of you may know, for those of you who are familiar with POAP, we've had this long-standing institution of the POAP curation body, which is a group of people that reviews the POAPs that are submitted into the system, that basically makes the decision of whether or not this is something that qualifies as being worthy of a POAP, right? So is it a worthy memory? And this is something that, interestingly enough, you individually, issuers definitely would prefer that this didn't exist, right? Because on an individual level, absolutely the preference is, please let me use your thing permissionlessly, and please let me use it as an NFT minter, please let me do whatever I want with it. In aggregate, what we find is that the resulting centralized decision-making, centralized in some sense, is a group of people, and there is a desire to drive consensus, and so it's less centralized than it was today. It is still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively centralized. But in the aggregate, what it results in is a higher quality in the ecosystem and higher quality for collectors overall, and it therefore actually drives benefit to the issuers as they are able to comply with the spirit of the protocol. So I'm not sure that answers your question too directly, but it's our story relating to centralization, decentralization, and decisions we've made in the past.
Yeah, I have a few examples in terms of what wrong assumptions we made about user experience. But since we're talking about decentralization also, I'm going to pick one specific one. So the predecessor of what's now CowSwap was designed to be fully decentralized. Basically, when we launched, there was an independent party doing some research on different DEXs, and they found out that, according to their criteria, for sure, our DEX was the most decentralized DEX on the market. However, by designing it that way, we kind of missed the point of iterating over it and launching a POC very quickly to get more user feedback on it. And this decentralization came with a couple of disadvantages. It was basically creating an order book on chain, and it required users to deposit into the order book and later on withdraw their tokens. And this required more time. It was involving more steps and also involving more gas costs for them to do every single step of those. And so that was basically a hard learning of going fully decentralized right away is not necessarily the right way for adoption. So now we took a different approach where we basically follow paths of gradual decentralization to make sure that we get adoption first, and then if we actually see that we manage to obtain users, which we are now, we are following a roadmap to decentralization.
Cool. Do you think that working in crypto creates any blind spots in relation to how you think about what most users actually want? And if so, how do you take steps to counteract that bias?
Yeah, I think for us, the way that Althea approaches the problem, we actually set out, 5 years ago to, to fix the internet, right? I think everybody says, hey, it's broken. How do you fix it? And we saw a more open marketplace existing in the internet exchanges and set out to say, let's bring this market all the way down to the end user. So what I'm getting around to is that Blockchain was really the tools that was needed to remove these friction points from this system. So we don't necessarily see ourselves as like working in crypto, but using these blockchain tools in order to fix the real systemic and legacy issues that we see. But because we took that approach, we very much started, instead of going out doing an ICO, this was 2018, so we could have taken that approach, built a blockchain first, and then try to fit it in with users. We built very much starting in the communities that needed their internet fixed, and working with individuals, making a product that worked for them, working with the network operators and carriers that are building these networks and needed these tools. So I think that tight feedback loop is very important to maintain, and I would say it's been very successful in that we have product market fit and now are going to build, more extensive tooling, or the kind of layer one that'll allow other people to build these kinds of tools as well. So I think for us, kind of took a different approach.
I think it's kind of hard, and the blind spots I think is that we're dealing with. It's like a paradigm shift a lot of times with our users, right? It's that over the last 20, 30 years, the internet has really kind of trained everyone to be really good consumers and not think about the application as more like a community or something, and so there's a little bit of a shift there to get people to be more active and part of this movement, and so maybe that's where I get stuck on thinking instead of thinking exactly how to make the most efficient, monetizable, and the highest PMF. It's how do we actually make experiences for people where they feel like they're a part of something.
So I think I can say that it's not so much that I think that working in crypto has created blind spots. It's that I know for a fact it is the case, right? Crypto users tend to be notoriously more tolerant of bad UX, tend to be notoriously more, philosophically leaning in terms of the applications that they use, and actually care about a different set of problems than most users on the ground do. For us, the way that this is manifested is that oftentimes we find that the product and engineering teams that are definitely more crypto native, right, have very different perspectives on priorities and what matters versus the business and operations teams that find themselves on the ground with users. And I don't mean particularly crypto users, I mean just people in their regular lives trying to mint POAPs and some such. And the way that we've tried to address this, and I think are continuously addressing this internally, is trying to bridge the gap between particularly the folks that are in product and engineering and helping bring them closer to the real life experiences of our users, because I think that if you give them the view on the field, oftentimes they are a lot more creative and ingenious in coming up with the right solutions than we on the business end tend to be.
I think it's extremely easy to have blind spots. We probably all have some. So I wanted to turn the question around and ask who here actually has a user researcher in their team? Nobody?
No.
I think that's actually something that we should try to adopt more, because it's going to help us to find some of those blind spots.
Like that, yeah. What are current barriers in the general tooling or crypto ecosystem that are still there that make it hard to build things that consumers can and want to use?
Well, from our perspective, our users are regular people that need internet on their phone or at home. So for us, our biggest challenges are on the fiat on-ramp, interaction with banks. Sometimes there's still a lot of false reporting on that side. So smoothing out the kind of regulatory landscape for the interaction between the existing legacy banking structure and what we hope to be a new, much more decentralized and egalitarian banking system we're all trying to make is one of the biggest one of the biggest barriers. it's interesting too because we actually work with a lot of unbanked people, both in emerging markets and in the U.S. So that even can be a challenge, which probably is fairly unique to the majority of folks in this room. But we are seeing increasing rates of underbanked or unbanked people in the U.S., which is great. Once they do get a wallet and have that onboarding, they now are, sort of greenfield, right? We're skipping ahead to the new financial system. But in that process, there's still friction to interacting with the legacy banking system, which for them is like Western Union, and which is terrible. And they're like local gas station, which is where most unbanked people bank, actually.
Doing front ends in a Web3 way is really hard. Like if you're used to doing Web2 development, there's AWS and GCP, and there's 35 different microservices, and your app relies on all those things. If one shuts down, maybe you can switch to another one. It's easy to update, but we have to get more creative on Web3 if we don't want to have any of those dependencies, indexers and caching, and those are the things that make really good UX, but we don't have those in a really good decentralized way. So we end up like making compromises and relying on an API over here, or spinning up indexing service or a caching database. But those things end up like requiring someone to maintain it, and then if that person disappears, then the app stops working, and so there's good and bad things about it, but it does make it really hard to do good UX sometimes if you get rid of that stuff.
For me, I think I'm going to have to call out fragmentation and maybe the wallet experience in general as well. POAP being fairly, focused on people that are normal, non-crypto, having them install a wallet in order to have the full-fledged POAP experience of being able to have utility and being able to have shared content, being able to have messaging, and all of the other things that are in the app. The barrier to creating a wallet just to have this and have to store 16 words somewhere on a piece of paper is too much and too hard. And I think embedded wallets still aren't quite at a stage of maturity where they would allow for like a truly frictionless experience, although we are happy to see that things are trending in that direction.
I really like Deborah's response, actually. I think really if the question is about mass adoption, how can we get more users to actually use our products, I think the biggest hurdle really is how do you get them to exchange initially their fiat into cryptocurrency, going through the KYC process, etc. So that's actually, I would say for us at least the answer that is the biggest hurdle.
Okay, so now let's throw out all of the context and insight of the panel. I want to hear what the wildest use cases you're most excited about, regardless of whether anyone's going to care about it.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of really exciting things happening right now, and over the last few years, we have actually in the middle of the desert, out in Oregon, 200 miles from the biggest town, which is like 8,000 people. There's an off-grid radio relayer that is up on top of a mountain that no one has seen for a year. Relaying and earning crypto. It's like right now it's on the XDAI or Gnosis platform, and it's the little relayer that could up there on the top of the mountain, completely permissionless, no humans involved, earning XDAI. And then of course we can remotely access that account and move it around. Which is really exciting. We're able to build real infrastructure that's solving a real problem, which was that people out in the middle of nowhere out there had no internet before the little XDAI router that could up on top of the world. The other exciting thing is we're actually in the heart of a low-income area in Atlanta right now, building fiber to the unit with other little XDAI routers that are providing composable billing that allows people of all income levels to be able to participate in internet and be able to pay for it the way that they need to. So that was pretty exciting. We also built similar networks like that in Nigeria. We're up on top of a mosque. There's a little router up there that's also earning revenue. I think to be able to participate in infrastructure that solves real world problems is exciting. I feel privileged every day to be able to make that impact in the world in a way that's sustainable, and to see the human element of what we're all trying to solve, right? We're all here because the legacy systems are fundamentally broken. But for us, it's telecom, but also banking. So I'm excited about kind of also the greenfield, right? Going right from folks that are unbanked, underbanked, low income, have these challenges, and onboarding them right to a crypto interface.
I think, this technology is it's really interesting to see it, people from around the world collaborating, coordinating, communicating with each other. And so I think what would be neat to see going forward is kind of the dropping of borders on how we spend our money, on the purposes that we align our resources towards, the way we coordinate with each other, and create kind of these meta nations or hubs and so I just think everything in the future will have some kind of ownership involved, and so I think that could be really cool.
I think for me personally, I'm most excited about POAP's potential to connect the world. One of the things that I've been seeing is that as society seems to be getting faster and faster, and it's been getting faster since probably society started being recorded. I think this is the problem that people have been complaining about in the 1700s, that things are just way too fast today. And it's just been getting kind of more and more intense as the internet's come online and we've all started talking to one another. The ability for having people that have the same interests, passions, missions, to find each other more efficiently, share information, connect, and start working together towards pushing their joint missions together. For me, that's kind of where I see the future of social networking headed, right? Not just the ability to connect with each other online for trivial reasons, but to connect with each other online for driving our missions more effectively.
I was going to go with a more feature-focused response, but seeing that everyone is answering more philanthropical, I'm going to give more of such an answer as well. So essentially for CowSwap, really the focus has always been to make markets more efficient. And this is something where we can really revolutionize the traditional finance system, which is really cool because in TradeFi, you have a lot of actors that basically are so benefiting from things like front running, sandwiching, front running especially, that you basically are at a stage at this point that you can't really change the market anymore. And blockchain is a new technology where basically you are able now to set parameters, you're able to define a little bit how finance is structured. And specifically with blockchain, essentially we now have block time, so essentially you don't have the time continuum that you have in traditional finance, and that allows for testing of new processes and new structures of how you settle or how you do transactions on Ethereum. And what CowSwap does is we are batching user orders together, and in this way we are avoiding things like front running. And the mission that we have behind this is essentially that we want to build a system where the value is kept with the users, right? We want to build a system that is ultimately giving the power to the end users and restructuring finance in a way that you don't have third parties that are extracting value from you. And I think blockchain is now enabling us to do this, and I'm really excited to see where this is going.
Among recent trends in consumer-facing crypto, what do you think is the most fake and why?
Spicy.
Well, gosh, that's a big question. But I think I'm frustrated by the sort of like a Web3 wrapper that a lot of the legacy, like kind of Web2 user capture models are still embracing, despite all of the, sort of empirical data that we have now, that the trust me bro approach doesn't work. And there's still a lack of transparency to the end user, which causes a lot of harm. So, it would be interesting to see if there's a, potential for some industry standards around companies that have transparency around decentralization, and if there's some way to, for our industry itself to kind of self-police, because we still do, unfortunately, have many of these companies that are basically corporations, right? It's user capture, use my smart contract platform, which is actually just a multi-sig. It's we'll capture the user, we'll take part of your revenue or whatever. I guess that's a little bit more broad, but it feels like definitely have not really learned our lesson across the industry.
Yeah, I'm going to say DAOs, even though I work at DAOHaus, but because it is, it's kind of the same kind of thing,
Right.
Like what does it actually mean to be a DAO? Can I just have a Twitter handle that has DAO on the end, and or is it okay to make these compromises in Discord and just have thumbs up, thumbs down things, and then trust me, bro? Those, even though it's my favorite thing, it's also sometimes the fakest thing.
Matt, you're asking us all a very loaded question. I think I could call out a couple of trends of not needing to, first of all, not everything needs a blockchain. There are some things that maybe don't necessarily have business on a blockchain. Not to name specific examples, but I think that's probably one of those things that we ought to be a little bit more careful about understanding what needs to be permanent and immutable and last forever, what is okay to just have, off-chain, verified on-chain. Social tokens, I've not been a fan of. Fragmentation of digital collectibles, I've not been a fan of. I think in general, you could probably find good and bad examples of nearly every trend in consumer crypto. And I think I'm going to leave it there.
A spicy question requires a spicy response. So my view, it's horrible how we are starting to normalize MEV. So essentially, about 2 years ago is when the MEV topic got more attention. And then tooling has been built essentially to extract as much MEV as possible. This has led to loss of hundreds of millions of dollars from the end user. And ultimately, when we then switched to proof of stake, we realized, okay, now validators have the power to essentially extract that MEV. So we need to find a solution that this MEV is not acting as a centralizing force, because of course if validators are able to extract value, they can increase their ease, they increase the amount of staking that they have, and then they over time gain more and more of the Ethereum network. And to avoid that, we had to implement PBS, the proposer builder separation. And that kind of led to a centralizing force of builders. And I mean, it has been gotten a little bit better recently. I think when we launched PBS, Flashbots had 80% market share. That was kind of scary. It has gone down. I think now the builder has 30% market share, and there's a few more builders in the running. But it also led to centralization, right? Because some of the relayers, like the Flashbots relayer, is still OFAC compliant, so they are censoring transactions of users who have previously interacted with Tornado Cash. And essentially, we had a point in time where 80% of all blocks on Ethereum were censored. It's gotten a bit better now because there's more competition in the market, but I think we have to be extremely careful about normalizing MEV, and we really have to focus more on application design that is hindering MEV instead of exposing it.
Do we have time for one more question? Or is that it? Okay. Do any of you have any idea of a consumer application that would get people to use prediction markets?
So one of the interesting things we're working on that I'm very excited about is actually tokenizing the telecom infrastructure that's revenue bearing as a an NFT or a fungible token that allows many people to sort of participate in owning a telecom asset like fiber optic cable that's a 25-year asset. It's revenue bearing, maybe it's earning $1,000 a week or something like that, and those can all get pooled. You can lend on them, or you can do a futures or prediction-based market based on your prediction for the revenue that's occurring with that financial history on the blockchain of those microtransactions coming to that particular piece of telecom infrastructure, which I think is one of the more compelling uses for blockchain is, tokenizing real world assets, and kind of our approach, which I think was, I'm a bit biased, but I think is very innovative to actually, we have that real world link between the actual microtransactions, which will come along with that tokenized asset. So we can basket them together, create new markets. You can do all kinds of interesting things with prediction. So I'm really excited about that. So.
I think maybe at the project management level, it could be interesting, or even at like organizational high-level objectives, like an OKR system that had some prediction markets about actually making some of the results or something, and making it like a larger market where people are involved that are on the edges.
No.
Wow, that's a tough response. No, definitely. I think there's a few cool ways of how you can leverage prediction markets. For information discovery, for once, to ensure maybe also that supply chain is tracked in a proper way. I don't know. I can think of multiple use cases, but I think with prediction markets, you just have to be very careful about thinking through the specific use case to ensure that you're not setting up false incentives. But in general, I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
To your point about false incentives, I think that's why it's so important to have that historical record of of revenue. I think that's what is one of the exciting things we can do about blockchain, like with the supply line, is that we would have that transparency that would inform the market.
Great answers. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Let's give it a hand.